There are days in my life when I can puff myself up into thinking that but for womanhood, Jesus would have continued on the way of believing he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That somehow I and all of my female ilk are responsible for turning Jesus away from the prevailing wind of my message is only for the chosen of Israel, preferably the male members of the chosen. Silly me. Jesus deliberately chose this district of Tyre and Sidon, shunned by most as unrepentant, disobedient, to make a very public declaration to a Canaanite woman of all people. She did not readjust Jesus' thinking, but simply afforded Jesus the opportunity to publicly, loudly declare by his actions and words that his message is not just for the chosen, the elect. And Paul echoes this equally loudly. I ask then, has God rejected his people? By no means. God has imprisoned all of us in disobedience, so that God may be merciful to all. We are unified in our disobedience. And let's not forget the Canaanite woman's state of mind. She woke up that morning with her daughter screaming in pain, as she had so many other mornings. But this particular morning, she'd had it and said, I'm going to church. I don't care. If he's not coming to me, I'm going to him. I seem to remember when the current, soon-to-retire presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, Michael Curry, was elected. One of the first things he talked about was the E word and how frightening it was to Episcopalians, perhaps even terrifying. The E word being evangelism. I submit the second most frightening situation for many Episcopalians is the interactive sermon. I personally find interacting with a sermonizer intrusive, embarrassing, disturbing to the meditative bubble I'm attempting to hide in as a worshiper, disruptive to the flow of prayer, all this and more. So here goes. Why do you come to church? You don't have to stand, but please try to speak so folks can hear you. How about 5 responses, and then you're off the hook? Thank you for your answers. One reason I came to church this morning was to see what happened next in the Joseph story from last week. What we didn't hear from the Old Testament this morning, but did from last week's psalm, was that Joseph ends up feet in fetters, sold as a slave, but subsequently released and awarded the running of Pharaoh's household. His brothers come to him for food during a famine. Joseph initially hides his identity from them, finally can no longer control himself, and orders his servants out of the room. He then weeps so loudly as he reveals himself to his family that all of Egypt, the whole world in that moment, was able to hear. Not the weeping and gnashing of teeth, but the weeping and embracing when brothers and sisters decide to live together in unity. How good and pleasant it is. He wept upon the necks of his brothers. Why do I come to church? I come to find the face of Jesus in a parishioner, in someone from away, in the face of someone I know. I come to hear the words faith tells me Jesus speaks and inspires us to sing together as one. The Psalms, the creeds, the hymns, and the prayer asking God for bread, for forgiveness, for direction. I come to church because I need to slow down. Everything is coming at me too fast. Stop the world. I want to get off. I come to share in Sabbath rest. Father Tom reminded the vestry last Thursday that the church honors and keeps the Sabbath. It used to be that stores closed, things came to a halt. There were not soccer games on Sundays. And as a church, we hold on to Sabbath rest as resistance, as Walter Brueggemann titles his book. Sabbath as resistance is God's response to the world's endless spinning. I come to church to receive the sacrament of bread and wine. I come to church to remember my parents. I come to church to remember what I've left undone and what I've done that I wish I hadn't. I come to church because I can talk about God without getting laughed at or looked at funny. I come to church because I can be vulnerable. It's okay for me to cry in a public space. As I write this, a window is opening. I'm seeing why some folks don't come to church. If I were a 14-year-old, wouldn't I rather be at a soccer game? I'm pretty sure I would not want the world to slow down, but rather have it spinning faster. Would I want to be thinking about my parents? If I owned my own business, would I want to be reminded of something I forgot to do or something I shouldn't have done? That's precisely why I can't sleep at night. If I were in my late 30s looking for a lifetime partner, wouldn't I have a better chance of finding someone in a bar or on the Appalachian Trail than in church? Why in the world would I even want to talk about God, except to ask why? If I cry in public, I'm a wimp or I'm too sensitive. When our boys were in elementary school, I remember their teachers encouraging us to bring in cupcakes or some other treat for birthday celebrations. 5th grade came and all cupcakes stopped, as if a 10-year-old no longer needed that sort of nonsense. Over and over, parents have said during the pandemic their children were missing out on their socialization skills, learning how to be with other people, conflict and anger management, speaking and behaving with respect for others. Who's to say we don't still need cupcakes? Honing our socialization skills takes a lifetime. We have not learned all there is to loving our neighbor simply because we've completed the 4th grade. Could this be why we come to church? To live together in unity, to realize God's kingdom, telling our stories, listening to our stories, to be surrounded by beloved community that cares what we think, welcomes outcasts, even Canaanite women, to the table, where we listen to one another's needs and dreams and accept different points of view as a gift of new perspective, not an invitation to hostility. If we are community in this tiny little church in Rangeley, Maine, we are not as insignificant as we might think, because we can offer hope to the rest of the world. If we are truly listening to one another's story, we find that the 14-year-old and small business owner and lonely heart and over-the-hill folks like me have similar stories. God wants to partner with all of us to create the beloved community, God's kingdom come. How good and pleasant it is for us to live together in community.